it will be qualified or even an evidence-based guess to say that science parks as a phenomenon, as a driver for innovation and growth, are here to stay. But what lies ahead? It is time for an expert outlook on the global trends and future challenges of science parks. Our next speaker possesses an intimate knowledge of the mechanisms of successful science parks as well as the bigger picture in which they are active. The seminar is happy to welcome Sanz, the Director General of IASP, the International Association of Science Parks and Areas of Innovation. Most welcome. The stage is yours.
Good afternoon, welcome back. If you will allow me, I think I'm going to take advantage of two facts. One is the setting up where we are, which is, and by the way, this will somehow connect to the core of my reflections today. It is one of those new hybrid spaces that are beginning to flourish in science parks and elsewhere. Very nice, very well conceived facility, and there is a very interesting rationale behind why we need and want to have this type of facilities. This introduces now a certain element of informality that I intend to make somehow use of, and hoping that you will accept. My presentation will be up to a certain extent not exactly informal, but a little bit perhaps chaotic, because I had prepared a skeleton of ideas, and then throughout the morning I was listening and taking a lot of notes of different presentations, so my script here is a bit messy, but I do hope that I will be able to surf through my ideas in a relatively orderly way. The second factor that I'm going to make use to make a different type of presentation with no slides, it's only me and my voice, sorry about that. It's the fact that today is a networking day, and most of all is Sten Gunnar's day. And I don't want to let this opportunity go by without saying a few words about him, because he deserves it. I've known him for many years. I'm very glad to say that we have been able to develop not only a comradeship in terms of colleagues, but we have developed a true friendship, of which I am proud and I cherish a lot. We have been seeing a lot of each other in the most strange places and cities and countries in the world for many years. What I can tell you is that he has been a crucial building block of our international network. He has been a member of our board in several occasions. He believes in internationalization. He believes in being what I call a globopolitan, or a globopolitan with roots, managing very well both dimensions, the local dimension that we all bring with us and the international dimension. And so this is his day. This is somehow our way to say all the best in your new professional horizon and endeavors that you are starting just now. So wherever you are in the room, if you are in the room, thank you very much for everything, Sten Gunnar. A big hand for him. I will indeed try to share with you a number of reflections about the main challenges that we as Science and Technology Park people and managers have today, and the main trends that I think I can detect from my somewhat privileged position of being the Director General of a worldwide association as the IASP. For the benefit of those of you who may know little about us, just a couple of figures. We are now over 400 members in 73 countries, of which 14 are here in Sweden. And I would really like to see more Swedish parks joining us, not because they will pay the fee, who cares about the fee, but because they will realize that belonging to a worldwide platform is useful for their endeavors and for their businesses. And I'm very much confident that our enhanced collaboration with CISP is going to produce, among others, this result of number of Swedish members at ISP. So I'm going to be addressing albeit briefly, things that have been already discussed this morning in a very interesting manner, and perhaps I will introduce some new elements. I will be talking about the internationalization issues that Mauricio Guedes and others addressed, understanding networks, that was, and I'm happy to say that was introduced by Magnus Kloften. I will try also to dissipate some common misunderstandings regarding science parks, not because for the sake of dissipating misunderstandings, but because not doing it, my experience tells me that somehow puts hurdles in the proper development of the concept. I was also glad to hear Paul Birmingham this morning when he mentioned the importance of addressing the marketing aspects of science parks. I actually started as the vice president of marketing in a science park in my home city many years ago, before I really took over the, let's say, the CEO-ship. So it was an interesting remark, and I agree with that this is an element that is often neglected, and we shouldn't neglect it. But main and foremost, I will be just spending some time in discussing with you or sharing with you what I feel is to be the true main challenge that we have ahead of us. And to do that, I hope that you will allow me to indulge for a few minutes in talking about something that is affecting not only parks, of course, but our whole society. And that is acceleration. It is related to acceleration, the main challenge that I will address, because as I see it, acceleration is not just anymore one more element of social life and development, but it has actually become a category. And in fact, there is already a sociology of acceleration. And if you are at all interested in this very interesting aspect, well, perhaps you like to read the works of a German sociologist called Hartmut Rosa, who wrote The Sociology of Acceleration, and many others. I hope that in the next 3-4 minutes I'll be able to convince you, if you're not convinced at all, that is, of how important this is for us. I often remember one line that I heard, first of all, in one of our World ISP conferences, and then I was so much intrigued by it that I went and actually found the source. There is a quite famous American thinker, Ralph Waldo Emerson, who once said, when you're skating on ice, salvation lies on speed. Now, that is quite true, but the truth is that speed is no longer the problem. We can cope with speed. The problem is acceleration, which hardly gives us time to react, to adapt, and the problem with acceleration is something that acceleration contains as part of its nature, is that it's constantly increasing. It never stops. So we can talk indeed of technical acceleration, and the question remains open as to whether it's technical acceleration that is creating the other accelerations I will mention now, or is a result of them, or they go in parallel. But certainly we can also talk of the acceleration of social change, and perhaps the one that touches us more directly, because it's slightly different, is the acceleration of the pace of life. And I think that we can all feel it in our daily life, this anguishing feeling that there are always things to be done, we never seem to have time to do them all, there are every time more obligations at job, at home, socially, more information to be assimilated and digested, new tasks, new expectations, increasingly quicker expectations, etc., etc. Many sociologists and many psychologists are beginning to acknowledge that this is a true problem. And however, this is not exactly new. If you go back to the literature, you will see that ever since the beginning of modernity, that we can say it begins with the Enlightenment movement and the Illustration, we can detect a number of thinkings that were already talking about that. A well-known name, already explicitly mentioned the problem of speed in social evolution. And people like Adorno later on, very interestingly, when he talked about speed and acceleration as a constituent of the new modernity. He said that because of that, the Enlightenment was becoming a mass deception device rather than a mechanism to make true the many promises of enlightenment, enrichment, progress that we thought it was going to bring with us. So somehow what happens is that the very classic problem of philosophy and of sociology of combining order and change has become an extremely acute problem today. And of course, politically speaking, a very acute problem today, because I don't think I need much arguments to persuade you that this has enormous political implications as well. In other words, what in modernity was regarded to be as progress and as promises of a better future, speed, acceleration, nowadays is seen and regarded as a big threat. It's up to you to decide which opinion you like more. And it's probably, there is probably a little bit, as it is often the case, of both things. But certainly, I think it's marking and it's defining our time today. And whatever problem, social or historical, we approach, we cannot escape to address it within this frame of increasing, unmanageable, in many ways, acceleration processes. And when that is the case, the time all of a sudden is compressed. And that is why, it was mentioned by our moderator before, we have a history that goes some 60, the history of the concept of Science Park goes back to some 60 years, roughly. And you can say, well, that is some time. Not anymore. Considering all these circumstances I just mentioned, certainly this is a period of time that is much more than some time. And it no longer enables us to claim that our concept is a new concept. So we have to start from accepting that no matter the relative youth of the concept of Science Park, it is becoming old. And when it becomes old, necessarily a number of issues appear. And one of them, and that is what I think is our main challenge, boiling down all the many partial challenges into one, is that we need to see how we ensure that we renew the support of our stakeholders. Moreover, I will tell you, support is no longer enough. We need to see how we recreate the enthusiasm that stakeholders had about the concept of Science Park a number of decades ago. And obviously, enthusiasm is something that declines, because enthusiasm is very much related to novelty, and that we don't have nowadays. However, and that is probably the very core of my reflection, what I seem to perceive in our Science and Technology Park industry throughout the world is that we are at a stage where not only evolution is happening, because the evolution of the concept has been with us since the very beginning, but we are at a time where a mutation is happening. Honestly, I can tell you that my personal, firm belief is that our industry is mutating. And probably the gene that is mutating is very much related to the location factor and the location issues. That has been addressed this morning from a variety of different angles. Somehow, I guess that, of course, not all science parks in the world undergo these processes in the same way. Some do not feel affected by that at all, and others do it in a very light way. But that's always the case. Some are strongly undertaking this aspect, and that will lead many others to do so or else to perish. So I think we can use three formulations to express this, of what's going on. First of all, we could probably say that we are seeing parks moving from location to services. One possible approach. Second approach, and this is a formula that I heard Sten Gunnar formulating it very aptly in Brazil a couple of years ago, we are moving from geography to function. If you like, we can also say, and I think it's equally true, we are moving from businesses to people. And that has also been mentioned this morning, Magnus Kloften, among others, the importance of talent. Because indeed, parks are beginning to be places thought, designed, conceived, prepared not only for businesses, not only for hosting businesses, but for hosting and attractive people before. Businesses come after. And by the way, these things that I just mentioned are the reason why our association, that has been for years known as the International Association of Science Parks, has added the expression or the syntagma areas of innovation to its name, because we want to make sure that we are embracing this trend that is taking off very, very powerfully in many places of the world. It is as if science parks are extricating themselves from the location factor, understood as a real estate element, okay? And as I often say, this is not to be disdainful towards real estate. Real estate is an important element. In many aspects, it enables us to generate an income that we need to do other things, but it can never be neither the core nor the element that consumes more time from a science park managing team. And that, by the way, has often been the case, even though I have to underline something. Within the industry, at least theoretically, we have always, since the very beginning, understood that we were, or almost always, I would say, understood that we are not real estate projects mainly. This connects, for example, with this formula that Paul Birmingham used this morning of becoming idea cloud landlords rather than just facility landlords. But this has been with us since the beginning of our time, to be perfectly honest. So what is happening is that we parks are demolishing fences. And this notion of enclave, of somehow, if you like, a ghetto of techno freaks, somehow separated from the rest of society, is that some people could have this notion about us is certainly disappearing. And things like hybridization of the space, integration, are beginning to take off. Up to a certain extent, I think we can say that we parks are becoming promiscuous. We are searching many partners to have intercourse with. Sounds good, eh? Okay. Because it's no longer the little nucleus of population of a few researchers and a few businessmen. Now we are going elsewhere because we are beginning to merge with the city, and the city beginning to merge with us. The city is what emerges as the main star nowadays, as the most desired, most valued object of desire. This is, again, not exactly a new idea. It's just being reformulated. If, and well, I enjoy classic philosophy, among other things, and I remember distinctly that I have read in Plato's works an idea that I always found it fascinating. He said, talking about the city, which was one of the elements he cherished most, he said that next to a number of fixed structures, it was absolutely necessary to ensure that cities had, and he used the expression, forms of movement that will enable a genuine collective agency in the city. Now, these words in Plato, in classic Greek, are indeed very remarkable, because we can apply that today and it works beautifully. And this is what is happening. What is happening is that the city and the cities no longer want to be just passive containers for things to magically happen. They want to contribute to induce and enhance these processes, to somehow guide them so that they match and serve their particular needs, etc., etc. And the interesting factor is that what we see in many cities is that the typical tools, mechanisms, and processes and types of services that have been devised, up to, in many cases, invented and certainly implemented in science parks, are now being applied to the city. So my, let's say, syllogism would bring me to say, if that is the case, and that is the case, who better than experienced science park managers and teams to somehow engage in a closer collaboration with the city to run and manage and translate or transpose all these processes from the little old enclave territory of the park into the bigger concept of a city or a region area. So I think that this is probably the great challenge and the great opportunity, because if we address that problem or that opportunity well, what I mentioned before, renewing the enthusiasm of our stakeholders in a broad sense, it's again possible. This translates into a number of things. For example, what we see, and we have a tool at the ISP, is called a software-based tool to analyze science park strategic models. It's called ISP Strategigram, and we see that indeed all throughout the world there is an increasing movement towards science parks becoming more urban somehow. That is happening in many ways, and that, by the way, does not necessarily mean that you have to be downtown to be an urban park. There are certain parks which are not in the city, but are adding urban elements to them, so, as I said before, so as to become attractive to people and not only to businesses. I don't have time to enter in detail into that discussion. I just leave it there, but I think that it's worthwhile that we all give it a thought in depth, because that is what is probably going to enable our parks to continue being relevant for our cities and our regions. And just to conclude this thought before I briefly enter into the others, because I see that, is that the time I have left? Yeah, time enough. Just think of it. Because of all these things I mentioned, there is now all of a sudden an increasing number of new and very challenging competitors for us. All these new, as they call them in some places, millennium spaces, these downtown areas full of cafes that are run in a different way, spaces that very much look like this one. These are attracting a lot of young people that want to create things, engage in entrepreneurship, etc., etc. And either we adapt, or we embrace them, or we engulf them, or we digest them, or we make them our allies, or we invent something so that they don't end up by just leaving us as an obsolete, old-fashioned, not attractive space anymore. We have to take that into account to make sure that that doesn't happen. I think we have many elements in our most basic fabric that will enable us to do that, to cope with that, and to create from the collaboration with these new spaces in a positive way rather than not. But we have to be alert and convinced that we can do it. And then, if you allow me to conclude, I will touch three more elements that are also important challenges very briefly. Internationalization has been already addressed, so I will not spend too much time. But there is something important about it that I think we cannot afford to miss. If you ask science park managers around the world about what do they mean by internationalization, you will typically have two answers. It's an either-or situation. Not always, but often you get an either-or. Some of them say, well, basically to me that means that I have to do whatever it takes to make sure that I'm able to attract foreign investment to my park, foreign companies that will become, I was going to say tenant. Perhaps this is a good occasion to recommend that we stop using that word, because that word is emphasizing a real estate element that we don't want to have. Yes, they may be tenants, but not always. They are certainly users. They can be residents. There are many other terms that we probably should use to refer to our companies rather than tenants, but I just said this en passant. So to ensure that we attract other companies from foreign countries to our park. True, that is indeed an internationalization dimension, but there is another one which is just as important, is how we science park managers can help our little startups, medium-sized businesses to become international, to go elsewhere. This is a costly process very often, Big corporations do it very well. They don't need our support. But the small and medium-sized businesses do need our support. Certainly, in certain regions and parts of the world, much more than in others. We are in a part of the world that is already well endowed to do that. People here speak languages easily. They have already approach to openness, open-minded, tolerant approach. But then you don't have those elements in other parts of the world. Keep in mind that I'm trying to talk here from a worldwide perspective rather than from a regional perspective. So creating the right platforms and mechanisms to push smartly, intelligently our small businesses to become international, it's indeed a part of our job that is gaining importance. Another aspect that was indeed also addressed by one of the speakers this morning, by Magnus Klofsten, when he talked about networking. I think it's extremely important. Parks are first and foremost networks composed by the different residents in the park, the businessmen, the entrepreneurs, the companies, some institutions. And very often I realize that while people take other aspects of their life as managers very seriously, budgeting, institutional relationships, marketing, they take it very professionally. Networking still has this flavor of dilettantism to it that I think we should start changing. I have studied quite in depth the mechanisms of networks, and I will just leave you with a reflection here. Well, all graphos depict a network as a group of nodes linked with these little lines that are the links between the nodes. And traditionally, theory wanted to say, if you want to modify or empower or enrich a network, of course you change the nodes, because that's what makes up a network. I will challenge that notion, because our nodes are not children that you can educate. We are talking here of adult people, educated people, mature corporations, etc. You don't change that at your will. Your job as a science park manager is to work on the links and on the channels between those nodes. There are a variety of links. Basically, it's very important to distinguish that there are some weak links and strong links, and they both have a role. You need strong links for certain things like joint ventures that involve delicate technology, secrecy, transfer, etc. You need strong bonds because you need to trust very much whom you're working with. And that means that there is a little network involved. But you need weak links that involve more spontaneity and a large number of members, because that is what generates new, fresh knowledge being put into the network. If you always keep your little group of buddies having the typical beer, you have a lot of fun, you know each other very well, you trust each other a lot, but there is not much new happening. You need new people to bring new ideas. So all these things happen depending on the type of channels and links that you can create, generate, and constantly oil in your science park. And this is probably learning the dynamics of and the functioning of a network is a very important part of our job as science park manager. Final notion, just a couple of things to conclude. Two common misunderstandings, as I see it, that I think are dangerous. And some of you have heard me talking about them in some other occasions. Let me mention two. Science parks are mainly tools for job creation. I will challenge that. I think this is a mistake. This is not true. Sorry, this is what I believe. If you want to create jobs in large numbers, you don't think of science parks, you create some other things. What it is true is that science parks are tools for qualification of the job, to raise the profile and the quality of jobs. And in fact, if you go through statistics, you will see that when you compare, let's say, groups of companies in park and outside the park, the percentage of employees by companies in parks that have university degrees, PhDs, etc., is extremely higher as an average than the ones you get outside. Think of, let's not forget something, and this somehow relates also to Jane Davis's insistence on measuring and measuring well. quantity will lead us nowhere. If we want to claim our importance by the number of companies and the number of jobs generated, we'll get nowhere. We are and we will remain a drop in the ocean. When you compare the figures of a science park to the overall figures of a region, or even a big city in terms of employees, in terms of companies, we are nothing. Our importance is not there. Our importance is in the type of businesses, in the demonstration effect, in the generation of new mechanisms that then can be used once we have tested them, can be transposed into other elements. That is what we have to take care of. Last reflection is, and this is, let's say, I always say it because I think it's important to say it again, our name, Science Park, Technology Park, contains the seed of a very dangerous confusion. Because the truth is that we are not about science, neither about technology. We are about businesses, about entrepreneurs, about companies, about making them more competitive. What happens is that in the context of the knowledge economy, we can only do that by, of course, securing smooth mechanisms that will enable science, technology, and knowledge being transferred from wherever it is produced, mostly universities, but not only, to our companies and to other companies. This is our job. But I'm not advocating for changing the name. It's already a name that has already a brand, is well known, functions well, but let's get rid of the idea that our job is science. Our job is not science. That is the job of universities or of big private company research centers, etc. Our job, or technology, our job is to make businesses competitive. But we don't want to call ourselves business parks because somebody else is using that expression and they are running projects that are very legitimate, very fine, but we don't want to be like them. We are something else. And that concludes my reflections and ideas on this Sten Gunnar Johansson's Day. Thank you for your patience and your attention. And I think I went more or less with time. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you. Since you have the unique perspective of the global situation for science parks, is there anywhere in the world which is new area, pristine ground for science parks where you see a development?
New one, many. For years we thought the science park can only be developed meaningfully in places where the knowledge economy is already somehow developed, where you have good universities that understand the need of communicating with companies and so on and so forth. And that was true. But as the concept evolved, we learned that there are models of science parks that can function in different contexts where they will not be just one more element, but they will be the generators and the catalyzers of these new processes. So now, for example, we are seeing many African countries implementing the concept and implementing it with relative good performance and success. Latin America is also incorporating as a region to this movement, so we can truly talk now of a worldwide industry of science parks.
Do you also assist science parks in the making?
Oh, definitely. We do a lot of advice and consulting. We do that very often. Yeah.
So where does your next Worldwide Congress take place?
The next one will be in Beijing. By the way, that will be the third time we go to Beijing. 2015, we just had one in Qatar. 2016 will be in Moscow, and in 2017 we'll see.
And I hear that there is vivid competition between the cities to host this event. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Something to read on the plane.
Thank you. Thank you a lot. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And I heard it through the grapevine that Luis Sanz himself is a writer and has a new novel coming up very soon.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
Yes.
Good.